Good afternoon, Patriots, and welcome to the 211th audio chat on the QNewsPatriot Rumble Channel series. I am the QNewsPatriot, joined today by Mr. Peter Ticktin of Ticktin Law out of Florida. My name is SG Anon. Patriots, for those of you who may not be aware, Mr. Ticktin has joined the show before, and he has a sizable track record of representation in the legal realm, as well as being one of the nation's premier constitutional litigators. Having worked for and at one time gone to school with the current president, Mr. Ticktin is now spearheading the high-profile election case of Colorado Gold Star mom Tina Peters, which recently came back to the national narrative after Miss Peters' commutation by the Colorado governor. Mr. Ticktin, it is wonderful to have you back on the Q News Patriot Show. Thank you again for taking some time.
It's truly my pleasure.
Well, I have to say, I may challenge you on that. The pleasure is truly mine because at the end of the day, we have a situation developing out of Colorado that I think informs the national discourse. And on our pre-show, you were discussing the dynamics of that with me, and we were talking about the difference between culture war and a foreign-inspired invasion. I want to get into the election-related things here in just a moment, but to open the call today, do you mind to give the audience a little bit of an overview of what you meant of of it being more a more foreign problem rather than a problem that is domestic in nature?
Yes, a lot of people call what's going on a color war or a color revolution. There are different labels. I'm not sure what they all mean, but when I do hear of that kind of a thought, or a revolution would mean from within, that we have a dichotomy of interests and philosophies that converge with friction between them, leading to war between them. And it could be small, it could be large, it could be anything, but that's not what's happening here. What's happening to the United States right now is that there are foreign countries that are attempting to take it over. The speech that President Trump gave on July 16th, to many people it was just another speech, and people have tended to forget it to a certain extent. But I think that speech is much, much more. I think that when we watched the plane fly into the World Trade Center, we didn't realize at that time how much it was going to change the world. And it's like that with that speech. We didn't realize it. Most people don't realize it, how much that speech is going to change the world. And it's a shame that some of the left-wing television channels didn't broadcast it. Frankly, I do think the FCC should do something very stringent about it, maybe even take away their licenses. That would probably be the right treatment for it, because the speech was that important. For a long time now, you've been hearing me say that China is behind the rigging of the election of 2020. And well, this is 2026, so I guess I've been saying it for about 6 years.
Indeed.
Yeah. And finally, now the President of the United States also said it. So it's one thing when Peter Ticktin says something, maybe he's right, maybe he's not. But it's another thing when the President of the United States states it. And he wouldn't have stated it if we didn't have evidence of it. We know that this is true, and this is where it's coming from. That, and with the Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum, or WEF. You want me to go on in that regard, or
Well, it seems like what you're describing is the broad globalist coalition that has sort of piecemealed itself together, both domestically with nodes that turn here and help the gears move, but primarily being foreign in planning, execution, and operational design. And when we look at it through that lens, it very much seems that the battle for the control of the election systems and the election infrastructure in the United States, it's not simply cleaning the election landscape to secure domestic policy. It's really cleaning the entirety of an interface that allows for foreign actors to usurp the nation.
you see, this is why I said it was my pleasure. Your mind is clear. You see things like I see them, but there's no fogginess in what you just said. And you really laid it out beautifully. I don't know many people that could have done that. The I don't know that I could say it as well as you. But I will say that you're right on the dot. You're right on the mark because yes, they've permeated our country. They've taken over our institutions, our media, our social media. I mean, thank God we got X. We didn't have that in 2020. We got back that, but we don't have our educational system. That's all bought and sold. That's all gone from kindergarten all the way through. There are many churches, including the Catholic Church, which is overtaken by this. The Republican Party is MAGA. It's not the Republican Party of old. The Democrat Party has been taken over as well, and it's the globalists. And look, these people have a major agenda. It's sort of like having 20 people on the lifeboat with enough food for two. If you've got two big guys on that boat, you're going to see 18 of them swimming pretty soon because
Indeed.
they're trying to save their own lives, their own skins. And that's what these people are. They've got it in their heads that if we don't make radical changes by 2030, it'll be too late to reverse the global warming trend that's occurring. And they only see one solution for global warming. And, to some extent, there's good reason for them to think the way they think. They're not idiots. They're just evil.
Indeed.
So, what they have, their agenda is to reduce the population of the world. At least the World Economic Forum had that agenda. Before Klaus Schwab left the head of the World Economic Forum, he was very concerned that there were certain states, or really one, that was a dissident, that was not necessarily going to go along with the game, and that's China. So, I mean, wouldn't it be just really an amazing, horrible, ironic thing for China to not go through with their plotting with the World Economic Forum? And,
Almost a poetic undoing.
yeah, because if they reduce the population of all Caucasians and all black people and so on, but not the Chinese, then the Chinese will have enough to repopulate the world and and take it over.
That's a
So this is
remarkable observation.
yeah, well, this is the concern that I believed Klaus Schwab had, and that Larry Fink does not have, and that's and as such, we've got Larry Fink now, that's the head of the World Economic Forum. So, in other words, we've got BlackRock and the World Economic Forum. Some people call it WEFRock because they're under the same leadership. I mean, how could they not be together? And BlackRock has what? Last I heard, it was $11.6 trillion under management. So
Gracious.
that's yeah, I know it's amazing. So you've
So let
got
me
all the
ask
money in
you,
the world on this. You've got almost every country in the world that belongs to the World Economic Forum. You've got uh, just this tremendous amount of energy, and we know what their goals are because they're not that private about it.
indeed. So, if I may, then, with respect to the integration of these extremely high echelons of society, this globalist coalition that we talked about just a moment ago, is it a fair characterization to say that that coalition is the shadow state actor behind things like Venezuelan cyber accesses to the U.S. election landscape, which we saw in testimony going back to January, or Chinese penetration in voter rolls, which the president just told us about 12 days ago?
China, okay, so Venezuela invented using the machines for elections. Okay, the first machine that actually rigged an election was in 2004, August of 2004, when Hugo Chavez was running to keep his seat in a recall election. He was extremely unpopular. He was hated. and yet he still won the election by 58%. He got 58% of the vote. So that was the first one. But 2 years later, we had it here. And so when we're talking about the information China has, we're talking about Venezuela, what they've done. You have to understand, Venezuela and China are dovetailed. Okay,
Joined
they
at the hip.
yeah, well, yeah, joined at the hip is one way of putting it, but it's a complete connection. It's like where does China stop and Venezuela begin? It's hard to say. Uh, but there's a third one dovetailed right into the other two, which is Serbia. And that's where the most of the programming for the Smartmatic machines, Sequoia machines before that, uh, and then the Dominion machines basically just copied all of that, and so Liberty now is in the shoes of Dominion, and that's so we know it's all cooked, and we know that it was all done by them. And when Donald Trump made his speech on July 16th, that was the first of many. That was the first salvo of what needs to be said and understood. You know, the nightmare scenario that could occur in the midterms. Most people think, oh well, so what? Donald Trump gets is not going to lose his position. The presidency isn't up for grabs. It's only the Senate and the House. So screw it. Let Donald Trump lose the House and let him lose the Senate. And who cares? We got 2 more years of this, and then we'll get another Republican place, and so on. They have no idea what they're talking about when they talk this way because these people, as I said, they have an agenda. They have a time frame where they need to get things done. There's no waiting around for them. And so they need to look at these midterms as their answer to everything that they need. They can still go ahead with most of what they need to do, whether Donald Trump's in office or not. I mean, let's just say for, you know, hypothetical. Okay, let's say hypothetically, the jab that so many people got, the vaccination in quotes of the COVID virus, which causes your body to manufacture stem uh, spike proteins, basically, so that come from your own RNA. So let's just say that that's what's being made to keep you immune. But let's just say it has a secondary purpose, and that secondary purpose is to cause your demise upon a certain thing happening. Some people think that there's something electromagnetic in the work. Some people think it's something called antibody-dependent enhancement. But let's just say, hypothetically, that there is a seed of death that anyone who got the jab also got with the jab. There's about 6 billion people that got the jab out of 8 billion people on the planet. And if I ask some people like Todd Callender and people that seem to be in the know about these things, they are pretty sure that there's going to be another pandemic. Only this time they've mixed in other things with the coronavirus. They didn't want to rely simply on antibody-dependent enhancement, which basically is this, that nobody knew this before 2002. But in 2002, we had SARS, also known as COVID-2, like COVID-19, because it was 2019. COVID-2 came out in 2002, and then they developed a vaccination for it. They used ferrets as the laboratory animals that dealt with it. I don't know how many hundreds or maybe thousands. I doubt it was thousands, but I don't know how many hundreds of ferrets they used. It had to be animals that were in the cat family because cats get COVID as humans do. And they tested out their vaccination on them, and the side effects were minimal, according to what they said. Who knows? But when later exposed to another coronavirus, every single ferret died. And they died from what I said before, an antibody dependent enhancement. And what that is where the antibodies change what they do. Instead of gobbling up the viruses, they help the virus do its most difficult part of its life cycle. They let the virus in through the cell wall, which normally they have a hard time getting through healthy cell walls, but it lets it through. And once you have a virus in a cell, the world is its oyster. It takes all your RNA and DNA, they break up all the amino acids and they reconstitute them in the image of their own DNA. So now you've got, yeah, viruses have DNA, same as we do. The difference is they don't have a cell around them, they just have a protein shell. But they are a form of life with DNA. And so if their DNA is replicated, then you get more viruses. So out of that cell come all of the baby viruses, they're full, they're not babies, they're full viruses. And then all of them go into new cells with the help of the antibodies. And so then you've got basically a geometric progression
The
where
body
you're
becomes weaponized against itself.
well, what happens is it becomes so plentiful that it causes what medical people call a cytokine storm and multiple organ failure and death. And that's what happened to the ferrets. And I will say that I saw a video at one point. Things get brought to me because of the work I was doing for 9 months for Donald Trump, where I was marshaling the evidence for January 6th. And one of the things that was shown to me, but it wasn't left with me, so I don't have it. They felt it was too dangerous for me to have it, but I could talk about it. And what it was like a young professional, yeah, 35, 40 years old, talking to a group of people at the World Economic Forum that were new people. And what he said was, he said what we needed was a means of reducing the population. And don't fool yourself. When you hear those nice words, reducing the population, they don't mean by discouraging people from reproducing or something. They mean murder. They mean such a massive murder that the word genocide doesn't even apply. What they're talking about is hell on earth like we've never seen. And but when they said is what we needed was a means of reducing the population without violence. That was his point. And he said, and now we have it. So I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I did see that they pushed the jab like crazy. I mean, not just the drug companies that would have had a profit motive, but other companies, other governmental agencies, and so on that had no profit motive. So what were they doing and why? I mean, why push it on a 5-year-old or 4-year-old, a 7-month old, because they got permission to give it to anyone over 6 months of age, and they pushed it. They pushed the parents, give this to your babies, because if you don't, they're going to die. And, you know,
Incredible.
it, yeah, I know, but that's what they did. We all saw it. And so, why they would push this, why they would make this thing happen is beyond. But it's tied together with what happened in the United States in the 2020 election and what they want to do in the 2026 midterms. So now to flip into what I was saying originally about the midterms, why is the midterms? Why is that so important? Well, if the machines can do what I'm telling you they can do, which is flip the votes on any of our elections. And we have an odd number this year, a high number. We have 22 Republican senators that are up for re-election, which is more than normal. No, normally it should be a third of 52, but anyway, we got 22 up for re-election. So what if they flipped 16, 17, 18 of these seats? They'd have 67.
Enough
If
to
they have
impeach.
67, then whoever gets impeached can be removed. And so we have our voters, we have our base, and they don't want to see Donald Trump go, but they're thinking, oh, well, even if Donald Trump gets removed, then J.D. Vance will be our president. But they don't get it. They don't understand. These people are absolutely the most brazen people in the world. We all knew that the election was stolen in 2020. It was so obvious. We all saw it, and yet we were all silenced because of their psyops. And I can get into that if you want, but let me finish this first.
Please.
They will not just remove Donald Trump. They will not impeach Donald Trump. They'll impeach Donald Trump together with J.D. Vance. But the first thing they will do is they'll elect their speaker. They have to. That's what they do. And the Speaker of the House is going to be Hakeem Jeffries. We know this. I mean, that doesn't take any great mind to come to this. We know that. So I mean, he's the ranking member. I mean, he's the equivalent of the Speaker of the minority.
The clear favorite.
Yes, and there's no question he'll be the speaker if they have a majority in the House in the next 2 years. The second order of business, impeach together Donald Trump and J.D. Vance for some baloney stuff. Okay, in other words, there's the death of Renee Good, right? Who was killed by an ICE officer. They've accused Donald Trump and J.D. Vance of that murder. uh, they could arrest them or not arrest them, but impeach them on the basis of war crimes that they perceive as war crimes. God knows they could pick anything. They could pick, eating McDonald's on TV. It induce people to ICE. It doesn't matter because they've got the votes. It's only the votes that count. It's not like a jury trial where they care about the evidence. The only thing they care about are the partisan votes. So with those partisan votes, they've got impeachment if they try it on Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Then it goes over to the Senate. If they have enough to remove, and they remove Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who's the president of the United States?
President Jeffries.
Ugh, yeah, Hakeem Jeffries. So there's a big danger in these elections. And anyone who's listening to this and thinks that maybe they're going to sit this one out, don't be crazy. We need you there. We need to substantiate that these votes actually are there and coming in. And then if it gets to that, if that happens, something will follow that will prevent them from even getting to the voting stage. Okay.
Something extraordinary.
Something story will have to happen. And we thank God we've got the most extraordinary president in the history of the United States. I mean, we've got the right man there. I mean, believe me, if it weren't for him, our gooses would already be cooked. You know, people don't understand. They ask, well, if you're so right about the elections, Peter, Mr. Ticktin, if you think that these elections can be, you know, taken over by these machines, how do we have Donald Trump as the president of the United States? What you're saying makes no sense. And that's a good point, except for the fact that I happen to know the answer to that question, which is that thanks to Patrick Byrne, who dealt with certain members of the Department of Defense while Biden was in office, or at least his body was in office. When Biden was there, uh, they neutralized a data center that was located in Belgrade, Serbia. And had they not done that, Donald Trump would not be the president. We'd have President Kamala Harris right now, if you can imagine that. And what do you think would happen if we had President Kamala Harris right now? I mean, the arrests would be by the truckload. They wouldn't have
Indeed.
room to put us, although they would make room pretty quickly in different places. But ultimately, there'd be too many of us, and they'd have to find another way of dealing with us. We would be the MAGA problem. We would be the free thinking problem, the intellectuals problem, the problem of people that want to survive.
Those
And
annoying principled patriots.
yeah, but let me tell you, everything is connected. All the things you see, Tina Peters is connected to this whole problem because Tina Peters stood up against the cabal. Most people don't realize that. Why do I call Tina Peters a national hero? Why is she? Because she went to prison? So many people go to prison. I don't say that they're all heroes. Tina Peters took an image of the Dominion machines, of the computer in those machines, in the tabulators, which are computers in those. They're not just an adding machine. And she refused to give Jennifer Griswold her copies of those images. Now, there were other clerks in Colorado that also took images, had images made of their Dominion machines, but they all wimped out. They didn't have the guts to stand up to the pressure to turn everything over. So they gave them over to Jenna Griswold, like it's turning your diamonds over to the cop that actually is the thief.
An apt
And so,
characterization.
yeah, thanks. But that's what they did. Tina Peters refused to do that, knowing that they were going to do everything that they could to hurt her and that they had the power to put her in prison or do whatever it was that they were going to do. That's what happened here. And it was that standing up to them saying, no, I'm not giving you the copies. In fact, I'm getting them to the Department of Defense or the Department of Justice. I mean, that's what she did. That's heroic.
Indeed.
And yes, yeah, and that's what makes her something so special. And that her knowledge of election fraud also, puts her in a good place to help us now to let people know what we have, because we have a lot of evidence of what was so obvious in the first place. And when I say obvious, I mean, think about it for a second. No state in the nation had ever stopped the count. Once the ballots started getting counted in any state, nobody ever stopped. Nobody said, I need a nap. The counting continued and continued until the results were made. It didn't matter if it was wartime. Didn't matter if there was a hurricane. Nothing mattered. Never did the count stop. And then on election night in 2020, all of a sudden, four states where Donald Trump is well ahead, in those four states, all of a sudden, each state at the same time stopped the count. Are you kidding me? We're supposed to say, oh, well, that's just a coincidence. And then proof positive. You look at the graph the next day. Well, the next day, all of a sudden, Donald Trump didn't win. Joe Biden won. But when you look at the graph that shows that these two lines are moving across, and then all of a sudden they flip, but with a straight line up for Joe Biden, which means that all of those votes for Joe Biden were made in one instant, in less than a second. Psst, how could that be?
Statistically impossible.
It's impossible. Not statistically impossible. It's impossible. You can't count one vote after another vote after another vote after another vote involving thousands of votes, no matter how fast you are, all in the same instant. It's either sequential or it's not. And there's no way that they could ever be counted at the same time. So we knew, the J6ers knew. And the J6ers are also American heroes. The president refers to them as patriots. Thank God we've got Donald Trump because he sees it, he understands it, he knows where we are. Anybody else would probably be stupid, and do something stupid, thinking we're okay or fooling himself. But Donald Trump doesn't fool himself. He deals with reality.
Incredible.
So, so you know, when we have a new product that comes out, like remember when the iPhone came out, there were people that bought into it right away. Those people that buy into new products that are technology savvy, those people are referred to, they have a name. They're called early adopters. And we have in our society, I'm not sure what the percentage is, something like 11% or 7%, whatever it is. The early adopters, if they don't buy into a new product, the product fails. When it came to the iPhone, which is a good example of it, you had your early adopters who had the brains to see that this was something new, but something that's going to be great and something that's going to work. And they wanted to get it, even if they had to pay more. They wanted it now because it's the new thing. And then they go to the office with their iPhone and they'd show it to you. And you'd look at their iPhone and say, what is that? How does that work? Oh, it's so much better than my flip phone. Look at that. It does all that. And you want it too. So that's how the massive population gets involved with these things because the early adopters get it started. Does that make
Cultural
sense?
diffusion, essentially.
Yes. So that's what was going to happen with the J6ers. The people that went to Washington who saw that our country was being taken over wanted to understand what the heck's going on here. And they wanted to be around similarly minded people. They knew the people that were going to Washington were also had the same concerns. And I don't know the numbers, whether it was a million, whether it was 2 million, or whether it was 200,000. I don't know. But I can tell you that they were all equivalent in technology to what in technology would be early adopters. They were the first to see it, and they were willing to spend their money to buy a plane ticket, to get a room, to go there and be there because they were so disturbed by it. There
In
was a
other words,
plan. Yeah.
I apologize. I just wanted to characterize that for the audience. In other words, they were the equivalent of the spark for an existential wildfire that this globalist deep state apparatus simply could not tolerate.
Yes, because then everyone would be saying, yeah, yeah, there is something wrong with this election. They couldn't have that. So if imagine when the iPhone came out, if the first people that ever wanted to buy them got arrested on their way to the App Store or to the Apple Store, uh, nobody would buy them, right? Because the early adopters wouldn't be able to do it, and so the product would fail. So this was the way of making that of taking the tip off of the spear of social movement to cry out against the rigged election. And it was extremely effective because we all knew, but you hardly saw people saying it. As soon as anybody would say it on any of the networks, oh, that's the big lie. And if somebody started defending the J6ers or saying the things that the J6ers were saying, they would say the hatred would it almost made Trump derangement syndrome seem small. The hatred for anybody that would say anything about the election because 5 police officers were killed by the J6ers. That's what they said. No police officers. I just want you to know for sure here. No police officers were killed by the J6. None died on January 6th. The that's a complete lie. And whether it's the committee, the whatever they call that, the committee,
The
they had a name for it.
unselect committee.
Yeah, you had the unselect committee. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the unselect committee. Well, it was, they also found that 5 police officers died. It's mind blowing that these things that we have this dichotomy where those people are willing to lie about anything and make these things up and then destroy all the evidence so that nobody can even question them about it. I mean, that's what they did, the unselect committee. The you know, but looking at everything that's going on, whether it's Tina Peters, um, and you know, since I'm mentioning her again, I just want to get it out there because people are confused. They don't know what she was charged with. They don't know really exactly, why she went to prison. So, the reason that, she didn't go to prison because of the imaging of the computers. She was allowed to do that. The computers were basically hers. She was the clerk of the county, and she's the one that made the contract with Dominion. She bought the contract. She signed the contract. She bought the machines for Mesa County. So she could do with it what felt she needed to do. But when she found out they were coming to put in what they called a true build. Now, a true build is normally what happens on your iPhone when you upgrade your programs. You don't lose your data, you just upgrade the program. So they called this a true build, but it wasn't. It basically wiped out the data. And you can still get things off of a computer after you delete something. You can still get it. But then the program deliberately wrote on top of what was deleted. So there's no way to ever get that again.
Making it unrecoverable.
They made it unrecoverable, okay, on purpose. Jenna Griswold is the Secretary of State who did that, having her people go to 62 counties to do it. She is a criminal who needs to be arrested and tried for, you could call it election fraud, but you could also call it sedition, insurrection, or really what it is treason. Because we know that it's China. It's not as though it's just changing, getting in the Democrats instead of the Republicans. It's not one group of Americans vis-a-vis another group of Americans. It's China versus MAGA. So what she did was a crime good for a year for each county she did it, and she should go to prison for 62 years. But that's a whole
Incredible.
other story. As the Secretary of State, she was the one responsible for the COVID rules. And she made a rule that at the time they were doing the things in the clerk's office, including the installation of the true build, that everyone there had to be identified and that uh, only four people could be there. And so what happened with Tina, she found out that they were going to install this true build. And she asked the state, is there somebody that can give me a copy? You guys are all saying we can copy the machine. Is there somebody here that you know that can give me that? And they had nobody. So she went around and she finally found a guy that was certified by the Department of Homeland Security to do this. And they basically told her, look, we're going to give you our best guy, but we got a problem. You can't use his name because Conan Hayes, that's his real name. At that time, Conan Hayes was hiding out because he had just been instrumental in busting a cartel that was involved in human trafficking. God knows how many children and women this man saved from hell. But the cartel didn't take it kindly and they wanted him dead. So she agreed. She won't mention his name, won't use his name. But when it came time and a name had to be used, she used one of her other employees' names. That's her crime. And for that, she got 9.5 years for misleading Jenna Griswold as to who was in the room. Because if Jenna Griswold knew that it was somebody that knew what was going on and was just getting evidence as to what happened, she would have just taken the computers and they would have done it outside of anybody else's presence.
Mr. Ticktin, I have to say the conversational arc that you've given us over the last few minutes here or so is so incredible because it ties the web together in a way that I've never heard put together before, and it's remarkably clear. And so that's why I said it was my pleasure at the early part of the call, because when we look at the globalist
Certainly.
connections, when we look at the connections into all of these different arenas, you had essentially agency versus agency, federal and state employee versus federal and state employee. I mean, it was a true 1776, 1777 style situation in response to the pandemic and then the immense level and obvious fraud of the 2020 event and moving forward. And so, if I could, I want to move to a question here with respect to all of that. You know, Miss Peters is clearly a national hero based on the situation and scenario you've just given us. I think a lot of other individuals ultimately will be revealed to have been similar style heroes, but maybe who didn't get their swan song in that emerging and burgeoning alternative media. But where do we go collectively as a civilization with this newfound awareness? The president seems to be escalating the discussion with the disclosures that happened on the 16th of July. We know that Ms. Peters is back sporadically in the information space discussing plans and tactics and painting the design of how we can take some of these things back. So, from where you sit, how do we respond to this collectively, and where should we best put our energy?
Well, there's only two possibilities. One is to do something before the election, and the other is to wait until after the election. What I've described as the nightmare scenario, where both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are both removed at the same time. Uh, how do you prevent that? Well, the only way to prevent that, and we don't know for sure it's going to happen, it's just a viable possibility, but it would take an awful amount of audacity for these people to do that because it would be so clear that what was being done. We would know the way we knew last time. At least those that are open-minded, that understand that something's amiss, would understand that our country is being taken over again. And now, last time, everything went very quickly. This time, too, if that happened after the election on November 3rd, so we find out the results on the 4th, then there's 62 days left before they actually take their seats. 62 days that are a fast 62 days in terms of how time flies, but a slow 62 days in terms of getting things done because you've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's in that 62 days. And so uh, things should be planned in advance for the nightmare scenario. And if that occurs within a week or two, well, let's put it this way, I can't say what the president is going to do. Not if I knew, I wouldn't say, but I don't know. Uh, is martial law. We're going to need it. There's no other way that we're going to get around it. And we need to make sure that those votes never occur in the state, in the Senate or in the House, where we have all these people that got elected because the machines are the instruments being used by foreign sources to basically rig our elections. When I say they rig our elections, they're stealing our country, and they stole our country for 4 years. I mean, when you think about it, these people did what was in China's best interest, not what was in America's best interest, every stage of the way. Open up the borders, get rid of the national identity as much as possible. Praise other foreign countries, not the United States. Get people's basic fundamental values all disturbed and confused, so they don't even know what sex they are. This is all part of the handbook of how to convert a free people into becoming communist subjects. So,
Asymmetric warfare.
yeah. So what do we do? When I was a young man, we had uh, we had posters that were made. They would be like 2 feet by 3 feet, and you'd hang them. Sometimes you'd frame them. Sometimes yeah, there wasn't a college student that didn't have some poster. And there were stores that sold posters. I mean, that didn't sell anything else. And there was this one popular poster that people saw at the time. It was a barnyard. It was a black and white poster. of a barnyard that was filled with geese. I mean, filled. It had thousands of geese, and every goose was looking at the camera. Every goose's head was turned. It's like somebody shot off a gun right in front of the camera, and every goose was staring at the camera. And then the caption underneath it said, "Now that we're organized, what are we going to do?" Well, we know what
Powerful
they were going to
messaging.
do. They were going to get their heads chopped off and turned into their livers turned into pate. But they, but that's what we're facing now. Your question is one that I don't have the answer to exactly of what we need to do. But if we should do before the election is make sure that these machines are not used. And if that means bringing in extra manpower to help on the election so that hand counting can be done, then let's bring in the National Guard. Let's bring in whatever's necessary so that we have that being done and we know what the actual count is. It's not the stuffing of the ballot boxes that count here. It's the machines. And we know how they work, and we know that they do work, and we know that they're already working in this election. In fact, the primaries have been affected greatly by it. So for every single race where you have seen a candidate who's a lefty become a candidate for the Republican Party, the chances are that person was put in by machine. Now, how do I know? I know because Weston Martinez ran for Congress in his district in San Antonio in Bexar County. Now it's Bexar, but they don't pronounce the X. It's just Bexar County. And he asked on the first day of his primary for a list of the early voters, the voters that voted the first day. And what he got was a list of what we call the modified duplicates, the people that are the copies of people that are put into the archives of the machine so that to the voter rolls so that the voter rolls can then be attacked by the machine where they pull these people out of the archives, vote them, and put them back into the archives. And lo and behold, the list that he got had the duplicates on
Incredible.
it. Incredible. And not only the duplicate, with these duplicates, like it could have your name, your social, everyone has your name, but it might be a little different. The middle name might be your initial rather than your name, but otherwise it has your name. It has your driver's license number, your social security number, your phone number, your address. All of those are the same on all of them. And then it varies a little bit. There's an algorithm they use to change the date of your birth a little bit. But the one thing that's always different is the tax identification number. That has to be different because if they can't vote two people with the same tax identification number. And so that's how they're able to do this because these are all, you don't need dead people in the voter rolls. It doesn't matter because you've got all your modified duplicates that are there. And like New York State alone, according to Andrew Paquette, who is the one that really discovered all this, he counts up to about 2 million of these in New York State alone. Florida has about 1 million. Imagine having all those extra votes. No wonder they could have the 8 million extra that Joe Biden needed. That's why it's so powerful, and that's why it controls everything. You don't need any other means of cheating if you got the machines.
Very well said. And so that leads me into my very last question here. You talked about a scenario a moment ago where perhaps we get to these midterm elections here in 2026. Perhaps we see a scenario unfold that is nationally and culturally intolerable from a fraud standpoint, from an interference or an obfuscation standpoint. And so if the president is then forced into an extraordinary measure, and I would dare say a measure not explored since the late days of the 19th century, if that long ago, how then do we, as the American people, and especially constitutionally minded patriots, navigate that sort of uncertain time? And I know that this is a little bit of a hypothetical or a speculatory question, but how would we navigate something like that and then return ourselves to a true civilian, lawful government footing, one grounded in true representative Republican government?
It, your question is excellent. I do think that the times are such as that for Abraham Lincoln. Our country is on the verge of being taken over and disappearing. And are you still there? I just want to make sure we got the technical.
Indeed.
Okay, good. So I don't think we've had a time. I think the last time that our country was anything close to this was dealt with by President Lincoln. We've had nothing like that since. I mean, we've had times when we've had greater control and greater control of communism. And I never thought I would ever think that McCarthy was right. But thinking now that he was right because, I never thought that communism was actually a real threat, but it is a real threat. And this is really what we are concerned with. And I discussed with you these underlying pinnings that are in this deal with the World Economic Forum and Chinese interests as well. So when you see this is happening, I mean, what if we saw that China came in not surreptitiously through our election system, but let's just say they came in boldly with guns ablazing, and they went right for the top and took over the whole government in the United States, and they were basically controlling our armed forces, all of our police, and everything else. But we still had the president, and he was still there. How would he deal with it? He would say, "This is a national emergency. I'm declaring martial law, suspending uh, uh, all civil rights for the moment." I mean, I saw this done when I was younger. I was in Canada in in the early 1970s when Pierre Trudeau declared martial law. Basically, eh, eh, uh, all of a sudden we had troops on the tops of all of our on our buildings and in our streets. People in fatigues with rifles or different kinds of armaments set up on roofs. Even in the provinces that didn't count, like Ontario, we didn't have the problem that they had that caused martial law to come about, which was the FLQ, which was you know a different group that started in Quebec, and yet nobody fought it. Nobody started shooting the military people that were in place. They were allowed to do what they needed to do until the country then got fixed. And when I talk about Pierre Trudeau, he was nothing at all like Justin Trudeau. Uh, I was just a young man at the time, but I did actually have lunch with Pierre Trudeau one day, and he was just. I thought he was a wonderful man. He certainly was not the communist, the crazy person, the woke person that his son turned out to be. Uh, but uh, but I can tell you how that worked out, and it worked out to bring peace and to restore every freedom that there had to be. I always thought Canada was a free country, uh, but it's not a free country any longer. It's a captured state. You know, Sooner or later we're going to hear from Maduro, and we're going to hear about what his whole plan was and what he was doing. And believe me, they were selling election results and the machinery to get them to 72 different countries. The United States is only one of them. So if you're wondering how could these things be happening worldwide, how could it be that in the UK there are 30 to 50 arrests every day for violating freedom of for saying something, for using the freedom of speech and saying something that's contrary to what the government wants? You know, uh, how can that be? Uh, it is. the only country in the world that is free right now. It's really free, other than some small states such as Costa Rica, perhaps, or Dominican Republic, is the United States. And if we lose what we have, the entire world goes down. And we will have the 1,000 years of darkness that Ronald Reagan spoke of. And that's what our lives will be. It'll be misery every day.
I think that is probably a cap on one of the most remarkable conversations we've had here on the show. Mr. Ticktin, it's been a great honor and privilege. Thank you so much for joining us again. For the audience out there, if you'd like to learn a little bit more and engage with Mr. Ticktin and the Ticktin Law Group, you can navigate to legalbrains.com or see the links in the description box below today's video. This is SG Anon. I'll be back with each and every one of you again soon on the Q News Patriot. God bless everyone and stay safe today. Thanks. Bye-bye.